Good afternoon, and welcome back to an Ageless webinar. I am here today with Kamila Issabayeva, and she is an Ageless coach here with Ageless Partners. She is also an Ageless researcher here as well. And today, she's going to go through biomarkers, as well as diagnostic testing companies, and a few other interesting topics within the reverse aging space. At the end, we'll ask her a few questions, and we're really looking forward to hearing what we can do today with these new tools, especially diagnostics, to help each other to live longer and healthier and really optimize our health right now. So thanks, Kamila. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Jason, for this brilliant presentation, for this brilliant introduction. And I'd like to introduce my topic for today, this Ageless Biomarkers Testing and Companies Overview. And just to quickly mention the outline of my presentation, we will talk about the Healthy Aging Panel. We will talk why do we need it and what is that. Then we will mention different aging panels and compare them. We will anticipate which aging panel is mostly accessible for us, and then we will compare different aging clocks. We will talk about their reliability, accuracy, and prices. Then we will briefly talk about single biomarkers and commonly used in anti-aging panels. And then we will conclude and interpret the results by hopefully saying what we can do, what an ordinary consumer can do today to assess the condition. So to start with, is there a consensus on aging evaluation? There is still no industry standard of trustworthy biomarkers to monitor the aging rate. However, there is a description on biomarkers, and there is American Federation Aging Research Standard, which says that biomarkers need to predict the rate of aging, and biomarkers should be better predictor than and the biomarkers should be a better predictor than a chronological age. It should be repeatable and validatable, and it also should not be invasive. Biomarker also should monitor a basic process that underlies necessarily aging process, but not an effect of a disease. And also, it should work both in animals and in humans. As well. So this is what encompasses an ideal biomarker. However, is this an attainable standard? We're still yet to discover in future. And what we have is when we talk about aging panels that we can use to assess the condition of our organism in general. There is a theoretical healthy aging panel, which is proposed by BMC Medicine. And what it covers is basically all of the major functioning areas of our body. And we can divide biomarkers in 5 groups. We can see biomarkers of physical capability, which are the most accessible and easiest to do. We can assess the grip strength, for example, standing balance, dexterity by using pegboard test, and also locomotion. Some of the examples of biochemical biomarkers, such as physiological functions, for example, we can assess glucose metabolism using glycated hemoglobin or fasting glucose. Then we can assess lung function with a forced expiratory volume of our lungs. Then blood pressure and blood lipids are good biomarkers of cardiovascular functioning and body composition, such as markers such as BMI, bone density, and etc. And other groups include biomarkers of immune function, and we can assess the inflammatory status of organism with interleukin-6 and TNF-alpha, for example. And also, finally, biomarkers of endocrine and cognitive function, and they mostly include gut pituitary adrenal axis, hormones and growth hormones such as insulin-like growth factors, growth hormones, and some of the biomarkers of cognitive function, including memory, processing speed, and executive function. But this is just a theoretical aging panel. However, it is a really good minimum to start with to assess the body, the condition. And there are some of the aging panels that are approved for clinical use or that are used only for research. And what we can see in here is a table which represents different existing aging panels. And so we can see their name on the left, then company, and then their conditioning category, meaning either they are healthcare ready or they are used only for research purposes. And also there are values of accuracy, actionability, and availability of all of these panels. And what we can derive from this is so this is the first part of this table, and there is the second part of this table. And when we go downside, we see more like we go to more accurate, more available, more actionable panels. And for example, the first one, biomarker panel developed by UK Biobank, has actionability and availability index of 0. And its accuracy starts with 66%, which is not pretty convincing. However, and we also can see that a lot of these panels are just approved for clinical use, meaning that you will need a medical healthcare professional for you to give subscription to give access to this test. And when we go downside to this table, we can see that some of the aging panels are healthcare ready. So for example, we can see Agent AI, which is a platform, which is AI platform, and DNA epigenetic aging clock. And they have a pretty good accuracy index, and they are also available because, so for example, Agent AI is aging platform, AI platform, which you can use online. And we will dive deeper into some of these specific examples, and we will start with DNH epigenetic aging clock. And I can say that there is a limited information on this DNH epigenetic aging clock because Zymo Research on their website, they say that there are a lot of distributors across the world that provide the tests. However, when you look into the distributors within the United States, you can see that Amazon is one of the distributors. And when you try to look for the test in Amazon, or for example, in Thermo Fisher Scientific, I could not find anything except for laboratory supplies. So in that sense, this test is not accessible for an ordinary consumer. Another example includes age reader test. It is non-invasive monitoring device, and it uses ultraviolet light, and it tells about the age products in our organism. And it measures the glycation end products. And glycation end products are good markers of cardiovascular disease risk. And what we can see is that it uses ultraviolet light to excite the autofluorescence in human skin tissue. And the measurement provided in 12 seconds. So it is good and it's very accurate. However, I could not find the information about the price of it. And this is, however, one can request a quote for it, and we still need to anticipate about the price. Another example include Insight Tracker, Inner Age, and it was one of the most informative on the website, and that's why I included it, though the accuracy for that was 67%. Here we can see some of the biomarkers that are used for females and male, and we can see that there are glucose. They measure low density lipoproteins, triglycerides, replicated hemoglobin. They measure iron binding capacity, albumin, and some other biomarkers. And for males, they additionally measure hormone precursors, and also there were one inflammation indicator. So I wonder why male testing includes more biomarkers, but this is something to ask them. And the testing price, a regular price, is $2.49. But when you do bulk testing, so for example, if you would like to retest again, or maybe when you buy several tests, you save more. And how it works is that you get started with a blood test. You get your blood drawn either at home or in lab, or you can also upload your existing blood test data. And then you complete some surveys about your lifestyle, exercise, and nutrition routine. And then they give you personalized recommendations and help you select your goal. And then you do retesting, and then the plan and the goal changes with time. Another one example is Agent AI, which is AI platform, and it is really good. And this is something that I would like to consider myself, because this is an online tool that is available online. And if you, for example, have data about some of these biomarkers that are shown in here, you can just insert them into their platform, and it will give you the like predicted age. And here we can see different versions of this Agent AI, and we can see that mean error for the age is approximately 6 years, which is not bad. And it also includes a different blood markers, and that mostly measures so protein status, protein metabolism, glucose, carbs metabolism, and it is good also for inflammatory factors. This is something, yeah, to consider. And however, we need to also take into account the difference between the informativity of biomarkers for older people compared to younger people. And that's why they have Young AI platform. And Young AI is an online tool as well. And here some of the parameters that are measured, and they are pretty similar to the healthy aging panel, except they also measure some of the, for example, liver enzymes and creatinine, and like it's more extensive in that sense. And also we can see that there are different types of Young AI clocks. They do blood age, mind age, and also NMN clock. And what's interesting is that mind age is a survey which measures your psychological age, and this is something really accessible for anyone to do online. And NMN clock price was interesting for me, but I could not find specific biomarkers that they measure in NMN clock, and it costs like $89. And this is how the report looks like, and what you get is that predicted age, and then they also determine your photo age, as you can see, behavior age, microbiome age, and this is really extensive and informative. Yeah, this is something good to consider for anyone. And when we compare Agent AI to other existing aging clocks, what we can see is that in here we see the graph that compared age error versus scale of training group. We can see Agent AI in the at the bottom, and with each version of Agent AI, it became more trained. However, it did not significantly affect the age error. But when we compare to other existing aging clocks, there are better options, of course, and some of them include Grim age, tuned in pace for the age clock, deep methylation age, and BGG. And among of those, I found the price only for the Grim age clock, which is 375, and I expect these clocks to be around like 300 and 500 maybe, because it takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of data, and some of the companies in here that are listed, they are they are the companies basically that produce these clocks. And this, if one wants to know their biological age, these are clocks that we definitely need to go with. Yeah. Of course, this is not a really accessible and cheap procedure. And also, when we look at another graph which depicts accuracy of aging clocks, here we can see the graph which measured correlation between predicted age and real age of some aging clock companies. And we can see that on the top, True Diagnostics, BioAge, iCarbonX, and Genova Diagnostics are among companies that are most accurate with their aging clocks to the real age of patients. And so these are companies that we need to keep in mind when considering aging clocks. And with all the available information, what do we get? Not much, really, because the price information is really limited. However, when we look at agent panels and prices, we can start with Agent AI because it is an online tool, as I mentioned earlier, and we can use, for example, we can use some third-party agency to get our laboratory results, and then we can use this online tool to insert our data basically and get the result. And I'm not sure how specifically Agent AI works, but I anticipate that, for example, Mind Age is a survey which anyone can do. And another one is Yan AI, which is more accessible in terms of the price. And some of the tests are suggested on the website of Agent AI actually, because they use the same blood panel. So for example, Life Extension Healthy Aging Panel, it costs like $250. And Health Test Direct, which costs $380. And they use a pretty similar blood age panel. However, there are differences, of course, in the results which can get. And on the top, Age Reader, which is a monitoring device, and we can only anticipate the result of this, the price of the device. Now, going to the clinically approved single biomarkers that are commonly used in the anti-aging panels. Here on the slide, we can see specific biochemical biomarkers that are used in different companies. And we can see that most accurate biomarkers that are highly reliable on the right side, on the right top side actually of the slide. And those biomarkers that are used by companies are presented in here among healthy living tests and clinical tests. And when we consider healthy living tests, Vemicop, Prodrome, Genfinity, and Seroscreen are the industry leaders in testing. And these four companies are definitely companies that we need to go with in terms of testing, because they use highly reliable biomarkers. And clinical tests, we need to these are some of the examples of companies, but clinical tests are less available in terms of that we need a medical prescription usually to get a clinical test. And these companies are also presented in single-omics technologies, which are emerging nowadays and are becoming really promising to get even more data and to know even more about what happens in our body. And what we can say is that among single-omics technologies, genomics is the field which are approved for clinical use. And other types of omics are still need to produce more data and more work needed to be done in order to be highly reliable. And here we can see some of the genomics companies that we can go with and look for when considering omics testing. And when we compare omics-based testing prices, we can see that we can see on the slide here, prices versus the type of data they use. And some of the most reliable services include True Diagnostic, Smart DNA, Microba, and Serascreen. And these are definitely companies that are highly reliable and that we can consider to do our omics-based testing. However, they are not cheap, and in that sense, we can consider something more to the left side. So, for example, cell science system, for example, 23andMe, Viome, Salimetrics, they are also good and reliable, and their price range is lower compared to companies to the right. And this actually concludes my presentation, and I was pretty limited about the prices of the companies and the services they provide. However, as more data and more companies and initiatives are going to be open in future, more information and more prices will be available for us to be able to, for an ordinary consumer to be able to compare and decide what's best for him or for her. And I think that with development of omics-based testing and with for example, sequencing getting more accessible and available and cheaper, people will become more ready, and it will be easily accessed by anyone. So this is something that we are looking forward to, and thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Kamila. That was fantastic. And maybe just keep that slide up just for a second. Just had a quick comment and then a question. I think that a lot of really great info. I think that there's so many companies that are doing these types of tests, and it really is only becoming more and more widespread all over the world. Whether they're testing any of these omics, including the microbiome, like this Viome you have here. And I've heard really good things on Inside Tracker. I know that's one I believe David Sinclair is big on. And I've talked to someone who's used that one, and they thought it was good. So that's maybe the next one on my list. Another one that I've been looking into, actually called the Viome one. And something, just a little tip for the audience for that one. When you get that test, you really got to follow their instructions exactly as they're laid out. For me, I sent in samples twice so far to them, and they rejected them both times. The first time I didn't give enough blood, and then the second time I gave too much stool. So you really got to give them like the exact precise quantities, or they will reject your test. That's what I've experienced from Viome. So I'm going to test the third time, and hopefully they will, they'll get it right that time. But yeah, and then so a quick question for you, Kamila. So in terms of all these testing procedures, like for someone, who wants to take something actionable from it. For me, I thought Viome, it gives sort of that nutritional combinations. You have like your microbiome that they're then coupling with your genomics, and then they're going to give me nutritional tips essentially. And I personally am going to find that very interesting rather than kind of guessing what I should be eating through trial and error. Any thoughts on like the tests here that you would see as kind of the most actionable or sort of the most insightful for the user?
Yeah, sure. So when we look at the healthy aging panel, the easiest and accessible are physical capability biomarkers. So these are the first that we need to go with. And after that, I'd say that biochemical biomarkers are great. And especially that, for example, with glucose metabolism, we can assess it by just fasting glucose level and glycated glucose. And this tells, and also BMI, for example. And these are like, for example, physiological function biomarkers and physical capability are already like the things that tell us a lot about the condition. So this is something that I would suggest to go with in the first place. And then we need to also consider the specifics. So for example, from my experience, as an international, some of the companies offer actually like testing for free, and because they get your data and you get to analyze your you get to know what's in your DNA basically. So for example, 23andMe have a global project, global genetics project, I guess, and these some of the initiatives that are highly useful. And I guess that this is, of course, if a person does not have like any complications with data sharing. And so this is something that I find myself very useful. And also when we talk about inflammatory, for example, markers, we can look at, for example, basic blood tests can tell us a lot actually about inflammation markers happening in our bodies. So for example, C-reactive protein. And basically by doing, for example, blood test, it already tells us a lot about the situation in our organism. Yeah, and I hope that this makes sense.
No, I think it does. I think that, I mean, just a follow up. I mean, like you've heard of like the glycan age test.
Mhm.
How does that kind of fit in with this equation? Like, I know it's testing for like glycogens, right? And is
Mhm.
that, would you see that as like a glucose test or metabolism, or is that a combination
Well,
of both?
it
Or
basically measures, as I understood, it basically measures the glycomes, uh, which is like a measure of sugars in our body. So for example, some of the proteins get glycated, and that means that some of the proteins, sugars attached to our proteins, and that sometimes affects our inflammatory condition. And also it affects the reactive oxygen species again.
Mm.
And that is why glycan age is really good. And also age readers, for example, which measures age products accumulating in our blood. And yeah, in that sense, measuring sugar and like glucose metabolism, these are essentials for the aging and healthy condition of our body.
gotcha. Thank you. Go for it, Simon.
Kamila, I really wanted to thank you and congratulate you for this really excellent presentation. I found it very, very insightful. And so just a few quick
Thank you.
comments and about the testing. So like, for example, certain tests are really handy for certain cases, like GrimAge was developed for smokers. The physical tests are really handy for more of the older population with grip strength, and also with things
True, yeah.
like the chair walk test. So how long does it take for a person to walk 20 meters, or can they stand
Grip
up
the
from a chair?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so those are very interesting biomarkers for aging people. And really, and having this overview is so powerful in the sense, like, if we have, so we can really measure, like, for certain diseases, like with diabetes, the glycanated proteins, and then you would think about interventions such as sauna bathing and things that increase protease and autophagy and those kinds of things. So we can really measure progress that is being made after certain interventions. So that's what makes this so powerful. And I really enjoyed this presentation so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, and especially with the BMI index, for example, there is a publication that says that that compared like different biomarkers across different aging clocks, and it basically said that, for example, BMI is informative for as a metabolic aging marker across all of the types of aging clocks, and this is really something powerful because anyone can know their like BMI, and in that sense they can deduce like the inflammation happening in their body, because like what really BMI shows us is like the ratio between the like lipids and to mass ratio, and this tells us something about inflammation. And yeah, some of the biomarkers are really informative, and it's really interesting to know more about that.
No, that's
Yeah, like for example, the Walter Longo did a few publications with the fast mimicking diet, and during the publication, one of them was published in Science, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016. They had people do a fast, so that was a human trial where people did a once a week in the weekend fast mimicking diet for 3 months, and we saw CRP decrease by 70%, so that's already very impressive. And really, like, I can only imagine, like, in the future, when with the coaching, that when we have like certain more augmentative type therapies, like combining like fasting with, let's say, sauna bathing, or fasting with certain nutritional interventions, like so there are some very fascinating interventions, like when you combine plant-based omega-3s with fish omega-3s, you see huge synergies, like you see a 50% decrease in cardiovascular disease just from that combination. And really, when you do certain interventions, it's a very fascinating field. Yes.
absolutely. That was well said. And for our audience, BMI, body mass index, right? BMI. Yeah, just so everyone knows. And then CRP, I think Simon was saying, I believe that's C-reactive protein, right? So that's something that you're able to measure in the blood that determines how inflamed you are. Just so the audience knows. And so any of these interventions, really, you can test it before and after through many of these tests, as we've kind of laid out. So if you're doing an augmented fast, if you're changing your nutrition, if you're monitoring yourself on a daily basis, might as well do some of these tests and really see, are things working? Do a before and after. Go take True Diagnostics, then 6 months later, take it again. See if things worked. So that's what I'm going to do with Viome. I have a plan. My plan is to I'm going to take Viome, then I'm going to take a lot of like prebiotics and probiotics, and then I'm going to take it again and see if anything changed. And we'll see.
So and what's so fascinating is, so I have a background in medicine, and even when I was educated, you have these silos. And nowadays, with the holistic testing that's possible, we can get like a complete holistic view of what is going on. And but certain silos are quite potent. So like, for example, fixing metabolism or fixing certain issues lead to changes across the board. And I found it very, very interesting in the slide 16 to see that one of the most accurate biomarkers was GABA. So that's a signaling molecule in the brain. So it's a relaxing molecule, mostly associated with pain modulation, anti-anxiety, and those kinds of properties, with sleep inducing. And it's really, I find it really curious to see that as one of the top hits. And so very, very interesting. A small comment on IL-6. So IL-6 is an inflammatory protein, but it's actually short-term increased by exercise. So when you do vigorous cardio exercise, it increases your IL-6 temporarily and making you less inflamed. So you get like a less of a resistance type hormetic response. But these are so interesting tests.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Simon. So when you're talking about GABA as a biomarker, so if someone were to test their GABA levels and they're high, so that would be like, okay, that would be good. Now, obviously, they could be supplementing with that too. So how do you kind of break those down?
So that's a very fascinating question. So what I know, for example, is that the ketogenic diet, which has been known for as an anti-epilepsy intervention originally, increases GABA synthesis and decreases the GABA degradation in the brain. I think to really measure it in the brain, you have to do like certain more advanced tests, but really another really potent hit is acetoacetate, ACAC. So that's a ketone body produced by mostly produced by when your microbiome, by the way, is doing very well, or when you're in a really long-term fast, you produce acetoacetate. And we see another one, which is also very interesting, and this is from olive oil, oleic acid. So oleic acid is the main fatty acid from olive oil or things like avocados or peanuts. And that's also, the fold change isn't that high, but it is a very accurate test if I see it from this chart. So, I mean, the possibilities here are very endless, and I'm just so joyed to see this chart.
Very nice. No, that was well said. And it makes me think, it's like there's so many biomarkers. There's probably thousands, millions of these biomarkers. And I remember, and I know we've all talked about this before, but with like Morgan Levine and her idea of these aging clocks and how that they can be kind of manipulated to look better. And I'm thinking of this GABA example where it's like, if I look at my biomarker and I say my GABA levels are X, and then I supplement with GABA, say, okay, now I've improved that one biomarker, so I've improved that aging marker. So some of these, we know that just taking things, if you believe these specific biomarkers, you're going to improve them just by supplementing in those. So it's definitely interesting to think about how you can really change these in real time.
So personally, if I was on a really low budget and I wanted to know what was going on with me specifically, for me, insulin by far would be the most interesting, in the sense like, so insulin has been linked to aging in almost all animal studies, even in yeast and C. elegans. You see that the growth factors play a huge role in aging. And if insulin, the lower your insulin, the better it is. Okay, you can obviously sometimes go too low, but so normally, if your baseline insulin is low, that's a really good thing. That's a really good thing going.
Absolutely, gotta attempt to avoid sugar if we can.
Well, that's not necessarily true. So the main insight is that mixed meals, so if I mix carbohydrates, fat, and protein all at the same time, that's really bad. That is just so bad if you do that constantly. And if you're not a bodybuilder or an athlete or people who have specific necessities for mixed meals. However, if there was a really elegant study that compared the ketogenic diet versus a vegan diet, and we know that vegan diets are high in carbohydrates, logically, and a vegan diet, because it triggers FGF21 as well as a compensation mechanism, does not increase insulin. It actually lowers insulin after a while. So there are very interesting things going on when you take carbohydrates, or when you take only fats, or when you take only protein. So very interesting things going on. But the main actionable insight for viewers, if anti-aging is your goal and you're not a bodybuilder or someone who has specific needs, please do not take many mixed meals repeatedly. That is just the worst thing you could do.
Very hard for the American population. I agree, though. I agree. No, it's definitely, it's always good to have, have the knowledge and attempt to bring that into your life. This was very good. Thanks, Simon. And thank you, Kamila, for all this information. Kamila, did you have any last thoughts on any of the testing or any of the biomarkers?
No, thank you for your comments, and especially Simon. And I appreciate the discussion. And thank you, Jason, for hosting this webinar. And I'm so glad that we can share and discuss this important and interesting things. And thank you again.
Thanks, Kamila.
One last final note. So we see one of the one of the other really high hits is glycerol, which is basically just an indication of fat oxidation. So when you're breaking down fatty acids, your glycerol level is higher. So again, another indication that fat oxidation can be beneficial.
Absolutely. So there's so much out there. Thanks, Simon, and thanks to our viewers. We'll see you soon.